Ecclesiastes chapter 2. Ecclesiastes chapter 2. We'll go ahead and read through this. It says, I said in mine heart, go to now, I will prove thee with mirth, therefore enjoy pleasure, and behold, this also is vanity. I said of laughter, it is mad, and of mirth, what doeth it? I sought it in my heart to give myself unto wine, yet acquainting my heart with wisdom, and to lay hold on folly, till I might see what that good for the sons of men, which they should do under the heaven all the days of their life. I made me great works. I built me houses. I planted me vineyards. I made me gardens and orchards, and I planted trees in them of all kinds of fruits. I made me pools of water to water therewith the wood that bringeth forth trees. I got me servants and maidservants and men servants born in my house. Also I had great possessions, and great and small cattle above all that were in Jerusalem before me. I gathered me also silver and gold and the peculiar treasures of kings and of the provinces. I got me men singers and women singers and the delights of the sons of men as musical instruments of that all and that of all sorts. So I was great and increased more than all that were before me in Jerusalem. Also my wisdom remained with me, and whatsoever mine eyes desired, I kept not from them. I withheld not my heart from any joy, for my heart rejoiced in all my labor, and this was my portion of all my labor. And then I looked on all the works that my hands had wrought, and on the labor that I had labored to do, and behold, all was vanity and vexation of spirit, and there was no profit under the sun. And I turned myself to behold wisdom, and madness, and folly, for what can the man do that cometh after the king, even that which had been already done? Then I saw that wisdom excelleth folly, as far as light excelleth darkness. The wise man's eyes are in his head, but the fool walketh in darkness. And I myself perceived also that one event happeneth to them all. And then said I in my heart, as it happened to the fool, so it happeneth even to me. And why was I then more wise? Then I said in my heart, this is also vanity. For there is no remembrance of the wise more than the fool forever. Seeing that which is now in the days to come shall all be forgotten. And how dieth the wise man? As the fool. And therefore I hated life, because the work that is wrought under the sun is grievous unto me, for all is vanity and vexation of spirit. Yea, I hated all my labor, which I had taken under the sun, because I should leave it unto the man that shall be after me. And who knoweth whether he shall be a wise man or a fool? Yet shall he have rule over my labor, wherein I have labored, and wherein I have showed myself wise under the sun. This also is vanity. Therefore I went about to cause my heart to despair of all the labor which I took under the sun. For there is a man in whose labor is in wisdom, and in knowledge and in equity. Yet to a man that hath not labored therein shall he leave it for his portion. This also is vanity and a great evil. For what hath man of all his labor, and of the vexation of his heart, wherein he hath labored under the sun? For all his days are sorrows, and his travail grief. Yea, his heart taketh not rest in the night. This is also vanity. There is nothing better for a man than that he should eat and drink, and that he should make his soul enjoy good in his labor. This also I saw, that it was from the hand of God. For who can eat, or who else can hasten hereunto more than I? For God giveth to a man that is good in his sight wisdom and knowledge and joy. But to the sinner he giveth travail, to gather and to heap up, that he may give to him that is good before God. This also is vanity and vexation of spirit. All right, so here we are back in it with the book of Ecclesiastes, going through this this kind of experiment that we mentioned a couple of weeks ago. This experiment by the preacher, by Solomon, to view the world through the lens of the secularist, to view the world through the lens of those who are living outside of the means of God, right? And as we talked about last week, that under the sun, that's kind of your key phrase for understanding Solomon saying, I'm doing this kind of as the world does this. I'm doing this as those who don't believe in God or who don't live for God. And so he's continuing that experimentation. Now, whether or not he was doing that just by means of an experiment, or whether or not at this time in the life of Solomon he is genuinely living in a manner that is distraught because of all the sin. And we read in the Old Testament that all of his wives had kind of pulled him away from God, and so perhaps at this particular time in his life he was kind of living as those who don't believe in God, or as those who are not living for God. And this wasn't just the curiosity of the mind. This was a genuine curiosity that he was trying to find pleasure in all these other things. And he finally came back to the realization that he had when he was younger, that No, living for God is what's right. Living for God is the ultimate good. And so nevertheless, this is kind of chapter 2, I think, is so incredibly relevant, and it's so incredibly powerful when we understand what he's saying here. And so he says we're not going to go through every detail of this, but at the beginning of the chapter, what is he doing? He says at the beginning or middle of verse 1, I will prove thee with mirth, therefore enjoy pleasure. And later on, he says, I didn't hold back anything that my heart desired. Right? I pursued all of it. And so Solomon sees and knows that the wisdom, quote unquote, of the world, and like I said, that which is done under the sun, it's frivolous. It's fleeting. It's passing. It has no value. It certainly has no eternal value. And so it ultimately any pleasure that it does offer is certainly not eternal. It's absolutely temporary. And it's really not foundational to any lasting joy or fulfillment. And so to continue this experiment, he earnestly seeks to find pleasure by means of, the best way to refer to this is secular hedonism. And so secularism, as we've discussed, is basically that you're doing that which is without the means of God, right? Outside of God, trying to figure out things without God. Hedonism is a philosophy that basically says pleasure is the highest good. You seek out things that are pleasurable, and that will give your life the most fulfillment. We talked about this very briefly when we were going through the book of Acts. When Paul was in Athens, one of the groups that he encountered and talked with were the Epicureans. The Epicureans were very hedonistic. Seeking pleasure was one of the things that they thought was of the highest good that man could attain. And so Solomon says, I threw everything at this. Right? I did this with all that I could. He tries things that would bring mirth. He tries things that would bring laughter. He gives himself unto wine. He says, until I might see what that good for the sons of men, which they should do under the heaven all the days of their life. What is he saying? I did everything that people typically do to try and find fulfillment, to try and find pleasure, to fill that longing that resides within every human for fulfillment. And so he goes on. I didn't just stop with the wine and the pleasures and the delicacies. I went beyond that. He said, I begin to build. Right? Maybe if I thrust myself into being busy and creating, maybe that would do it. And he begins to build. He builds houses. He builds vineyards, gardens, orchards. He plants trees, and he builds things to water the trees. And so he throws himself into that. But then he goes on. He doesn't stop there. He gathers things. He gathers great possessions. He gathers servants, cattle, silver, money. He says peculiar treasures. Obviously, I don't know exactly what that would be in reference to, or specifically what that would be in reference to, but valuable things nonetheless, peculiar treasures, singers, a variety of instruments, basically anything that people would assign some kind of value to, right? He says, I'm going to heap those things up to myself. And why I said that I think this is such a relevant and powerful portion of Scripture is because the exact things that Solomon is seeking here are the exact things that people are still seeking today. Right? What do people want? They dive into alcohol. They dive into money. They dive into possessions. They dive into their work. Right? They think if I can just do this, I will find fulfillment in this. If somebody at the end of the day can tell me that I've done a good job because I've climbed the ladder, I have reached the pinnacle of success, and there's so many dollar signs attached to my name, that is what will give me ultimate fulfillment. And the sad thing about this is, and we've talked about this in the past, that so many studies have been done on the most rich or the ultra-rich people in the world, and none of them are satisfied. None of them. Not one of them that they have done these studies on have ever really got to the point where they said, this is enough. I can be fulfilled with what I have. And we're talking about billionaires, right? No, what do they? No, I need another billion. I need more, right? Because they think that that's going to give them fulfillment. And even when they get to that place where they thought they would find it, they still don't have it. Why is it? Because that's not what they're seeking. That's what they think they want. But that's not ultimately what they're seeking for. And so Solomon is doing that here. He plunges himself, like I said, into the secular hedonistic mindset. I'm going to do whatever will bring pleasure. Solomon, at the end of this, he could rightly say, I was great. And what does he mean by that? The world could look at Solomon and say, if ever I was going to be happy, if I was in Solomon's shoes, I would be happy. Right? He had everything you could possibly ever want. The world would look at Solomon and say, he was great. He plunged himself into every endeavor that somebody might think would bring fulfillment. He said, whatsoever mine eyes desired, I kept not from them. I withheld not my heart from any joy. And no, it's not specifically listed here. We obviously know from history elsewhere that you could add women to that list. He had it all. I mean, again, if there's anything that the world would ever say, this is my desire, Solomon had it. And he plunged himself into it. However, the main point being, just as before, what does he say? I looked on all the works that my hands had wrought, and on the labor that I had labored to do, and behold, all was vanity and vexation of spirit, and there was no profit under the sun. That's where it all ultimately led. Solomon could walk through grand halls full of possessions and servants. He could look out and see his orchards. He could see his cattle. He could see his treasures. He could see the casks of wine and all the things that he could ever want, all the women that he could ever want, everything that his heart could ever want. But what does he say? It's nothing. It doesn't add up to anything substantial. This is the universal cry of those who are seeking to find fulfillment in anything and everything other than the God who died for them. Whether or not they know it, and more often than not they don't, whether or not they know it, that's what they're seeking. What they think they're going to find fulfillment in drugs and sex and work and money and fame and fortune, and what they're actually seeking is reconciliation with their God. That's what they're seeking. They're seeking a relationship with their Creator. And they think they're going to find fulfillment somewhere else. This is such an amazing quote by Randy Alcorn here. He said, nothing is more often misdiagnosed than our homesickness for heaven. We think that what we want is sex, drugs, alcohol, a new job, a raise, a doctorate, a spouse, a large screen television, a new car, a cabin in the woods, a condo in Hawaii. Here's what he says. What we really want is the person we were made for, Jesus, and the place we were made for, heaven. Nothing less can satisfy us. Now listen to what he says again. What we really want is the person we were made for. That's where we find fulfillment. That's what people are searching for. Again, more often than not, they don't realize it. They don't understand it. And that's why they need somebody to come along and give the gospel. That's why they need somebody to come along. As Paul told the Romans, how will they hear without a preacher? Right? And he's not talking about, a preacher like what I'm doing. He's talking about just somebody to come along and tell them, preach to them the gospel. Because that's what people are looking for. And Solomon could say, Solomon is basically telling, look at my life. Look at what I've done as an example. You think you want what I have. And here I'm telling you as one who has it and has it all. It's not what you're looking for. It's not what you're looking for. And what you think you're going to feel, how you think you're going to be once you have all of these things, it's not it. It's not what you think it is. It's not how you think it's going to make you feel. Again, what does it say? It's vanity. It's vexation. And so he goes on, and it's not just that which is pleasureful and that. He goes on starting in verse 12. It says, I turned myself to behold wisdom. And so it's not just the material things. No, even knowledge and wisdom. He says, I turned myself to wisdom. And ultimately what he could say is that there's benefit. Obviously, everybody would agree there's benefit in wisdom. But he also saw, and this is what led him to, I don't want to get ahead of myself, but led him to a pretty powerful statement here in a minute, is that the end of the wise man is the same as the fool. Right? I can attain myself unto wisdom. I can dedicate my life to knowledge. And I can become one of the wisest men who ever lived. But you know what my ultimate aim is? My ultimate aim is going to be the grave, just the same as the drunkard who was homeless and never attained it. The fool and the wise man have the same end, right? That there's no differentiation. And so he says, then instead I said in my heart, as it happeneth to the fool, so it happeneth even to me. And why was I then more wise? And then I said in my heart, that is also vanity. Death itself is, here's the point he's making, it is the great equalizer. It doesn't matter what amount you have, what amount of possessions you have, what amount of knowledge you have attained to, your end will be the same as every person who has ever lived or will ever live. Death itself is the great equalizer. How can a man, here's what he's asking, how can a man truly be great if he will have the same end as those who are not? Right? Your heart's going to stop just like their heart's going to stop. And so this led to the somber notion, and this is what I was talking about a while ago. Therefore, I hated life. I hated life. This is why statements like this are why Ecclesiastes is and it's been so eye-opening to me because, like I said, this is a book I've never really spent a great amount of time in before. It's very, very relevant. I mean, we have seen suicide and suicide ideology skyrocket over the past 10, 20 years. Now, a large part of that is because what was once called mental illness 20 years ago, now we're saying, no, it's good and right. Let's affirm that. And people are somehow surprised that that's not fixing people's problems. And so, we've got to understand that people are getting to the point where they're saying, I hated life. Why do they hate life? Because they're living without their Creator. Because they're living without the one who died for them. Because they're trying to find fulfillment in pleasure, in money, in possessions, in wisdom, in knowledge, and they're just not finding fulfillment because they're looking in the wrong places. And so again, use Solomon as your example in this. I hated life. He hated, as he's beginning to think about this, he hated that his hard work, all the things that he had attained, all the possessions he had gained, even the wisdom, right? Everything that he could potentially hand off to somebody else. He hated to think about the fact that eventually all the things that he had attained were going to go off to somebody else who didn't work for it and possibly didn't deserve it, right? And this is something that also led to him to have this kind of foul notion. He says in verse 19, and who knoweth whether he shall be a wise man or a fool? I've gained all these things, all these knowledge, all these possessions. I'm going to hand them off to somebody when I die. Who knows what he's going to do with them? What if he squanders it? What if I hand off wisdom that he can't even contemplate? Right? What happens to my legacy? This is kind of an important question for him. What happens to my legacy? And so because of this, he says, I went about to cause my heart to despair of all the labor which I took under the sun. And so again, he's looking at his work with the wrong perspective. He's looking at his work as is it going to bring me fulfillment, instead of what we're going to see in just a second, instead of that the fruit of your labor is a gift from God. That's how he should be looking at it. And so he questions whether work in and of itself is even worth it. Right? Is any of this worth it? Is it worth it that I have spent so much time endeavoring to bring about anything that could be considered a good to humanity? But then we get to the end of the chapter, verses 24, 25, and 26, and Solomon provides, again, a glimpse of the ultimate point he's getting to, but a glimpse of an answer. So verse 24, there is nothing better for a man than that he should eat and drink, and that he should make his soul enjoy good in his labor. And he says, this also I saw, that it was from the hand of God. And so he provides an answer to the vanity of work that he found so burdensome before. Because before, he was looking at work as something he could thrust himself into to find fulfillment, instead of seeing God has provided labor as a means to have provision. Right? And so this is what he's saying. Enjoy the fruit of your labor as it is a gift from God. That's one thing we can do. And I'm going to quote this from Kidner. And this is a deep quote that he gives here. But let me just quote it first. He says, in themselves and rightly used, the basic things of life are sweet and good. Food, drink, and work are samples of them. And Colette will remind us of others later on in the book. What spoils them, and this is the key, what spoils them is our hunger to get out of them more than they can give, a symptom of the longing which differentiates us from the beasts, but whose misdirection is the underlying theme of this book. In other words, here's what he's saying. You can have an animal out on the field who labors, let's just say, after a kill. You picture a lion chasing a gazelle, right? And he chases that thing down, and sometimes that hunt might last for a long time. But at the end of that hunt, what happens? He gets the gazelle, and he enjoys the fruit of his labor, right? That lion is not sitting there contemplating whether or not whether when he killed that gazelle, if he's going to leave a legacy for his children. And so Kidner here is saying that there's something that differentiates us from the beast, is that sometimes the spoils from our work, he says what spoils them is our hunger to get out of them more than they can give. Again, when people thrust themselves into their work, more often than not, well, maybe not more often than not, but a lot of the times they're seeking to find, as we've been talking about all night, they're seeking to find the fulfillment in the fruit of their labor that can only come from a relationship with God. Right? The money, the provision, the things that a job can provide you are good in and of themselves. Now, you can use them to do bad things, but the fruit of your labor is in and of itself a good thing. God has provided you that good thing. He's provided you that job to put a roof over your head, to put food on the table, and we can enjoy them as gifts from God, but we don't need to seek from them the fulfillment that only comes from a relationship with God. Okay, and so we have to put them in the right perspective. And so Solomon here is saying, enjoy them for what they are. Enjoy them for what they are. However, he ends the chapter by saying this, even greater gifts are given by God to those, as it says in verse 26, who are good in his sight. And those who are good in his sight are given wisdom and knowledge and joy. And then this is in contrast to the sinner, which ever lives in the experiment that Solomon is talking about, to travail, to gather up, to heap up that which he cannot keep. And I want to quote Constable here, because I think he says as well, and I think this is an important fact to remember, especially here in chapter 2. And so he says this. He says, in these verses, Solomon implied that God's rewarding or punishing a person for his trust in God and his ethical behavior would take place before death. And again, this is verse 26. For God giveth to a man that is good in his sight. So he's blessing those who are living righteously, wisdom and knowledge and joy. But to the sinner he giveth travail to gather to heap up. So what he's talking about, the way in which we live prior to death, God is going to judge or God is going to reward. And so he says, this is normally what happens. Therefore, Solomon's counsel is good advice. However, from later revelation, we learn that final judgment would take place after this life, and that God's rewards are not just temporal, but eternal. Therefore, as believers, we can find greater satisfaction in our work itself than Solomon could. In short, later revelation has not invalidated Solomon's views, but has enriched them. In other words, what is he saying? Solomon here is basically saying, work, enjoy it, because there's fruits that can be reaped from it, and you can enjoy those as gifts from God. That's good, that is true, and there's nothing, as he says, there's nothing in Scripture that invalidates that. But what we can do as New Testament Christians is come along and say, not just work and reap the benefits from your work, but as Christians, work in the fields of Christ and reap things that are not just going to last here, but are going to last eternally. Right? So we can enjoy not only temporal benefits from Christ, we can enjoy eternal benefits from Christ. And so for the New Testament Christian looking at Ecclesiastes, we can say a hearty amen to what he's saying, and also say, I'm going to enjoy those benefits not just in the here and now, but in the there and then and forever. And so this is why he says that the New Testament doesn't just validate what he says, it enriches what he says. It makes these truths even greater. But again, Ecclesiastes becomes such a potent and such a relevant book to a society that is constantly on the move, constantly seeking validation, constantly seeking fulfillment, and anything and everything but that which the Bible prescribes. And they think, if I just get the newest thing, if I can just be involved in this new event, if I can be involved with this particular group, if I can attain this level of in my job, or this level of prestige, or this level, whatever, if I can just get to that next level, then I'll have fulfillment. Then I will find and have everything that I'm looking for. Whenever God is knocking on the door of their heart and saying, this is all you need. This is all you need is reconciliation and a relationship with your Creator. That's what you're looking for. And so Solomon sees the vanity of what he calls the vanity of those who are trying to seek pleasure and fulfillment in all these worldly things, all these secular things, without realizing that Christ is just right there. He's just right there, and he's available. So, again, when you look around at our world, man, Ecclesiastes, it really jumps off the page. And it's been really a joy to which a lot of people might not say about that book, but it's really been a joy to study for me the last few weeks. So hopefully for you as well. Okay. I only have one